What's happening, everybody? This is Jon Denton and welcome to the very first episode of my new Q&A show. Now, I don't actually have a name for this show yet. I'm going to be thinking of one, but why let that delay the show? So 5 questions every show. It can be on games journalism, games marketing, life, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, parenting, literally anything, and I will do my best to answer them. Okay, first question.
Manly J Panda says, I've seen you mention and arty Gary V recently. What specifically has he inspired you to do or change?
So yeah, it's a pretty appropriate question, and there's no doubt that this show and the format of this show and how it's going to proceed is pretty much a direct rip-off of Ask Gary V, and the temptation to call it Ask JD is high, but I can't do that because that's just too far. I've never been great at taking people's advice, and that's because I've always found a lot of people's advice comes from a good place in their heart, but people quite often don't have the experience to back that up, so it's kind of an issue that I have. What I am good at is taking advice from people who've been there and done it. So, my coach at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has won a ton of fights in MMA. He was in The Ultimate Fighter. He's a phenomenal grappler. So when he speaks, you can't help but listen. And I found a guy, an ex-US Navy SEAL, who has a podcast, and he was on the Joe Rogan show. It's called Jocko Willink. And if you follow me on Twitter, I retweet his stuff quite a lot. And this guy now runs a company where he goes in and helps businesses with his partner to basically improve leadership, all this sort of stuff. And the lessons that he's giving on his podcast and on his Twitter, and just the stuff he was saying about owning all your mistakes, owning anything that happens in your life, any problems that happen in your life, it's all your fault. So you basically take the attitude of, he calls it extreme ownership. So yeah, you don't like your boss, or your boss has done something wrong, or your boss is taking credit for it, let him take credit for it, and then he can do a much better job of explaining it than I can. It's just it's a state of mind. And I discovered Gary Vaynerchuk thanks to my friend Matt Murray. Follow him on Twitter if you don't already. About a few months ago, he mentioned him a few months before that, and I just wasn't really keen. I found the guy too intense, and then I decided to go back, and I realised he was actually, even though he's like a business mogul and much more of a self-promoter online and a different type of personality, he was actually pretty much saying the same sort of things, just in a slightly different way. Very, very similar attitude, all about like mindset and positivity and things like that. So yeah, just to kind of, from Jocko Willink to Gary Vaynerchuk, through a few other people, and just through my own state of mind, is why I've been retweeting and sharing some of his stuff, because I think some people that follow me may get something out of it. Other people won't, but why not put it out there for the 2, 3, 4 people that might get something out of it? I know I have, and if that can help somebody else, even if it's one other person, go and put out content that they want to put out, or just put them in a better state of mind, even if it's just for a day, then it's worth doing.
Brad Davies says, any standout games which your opinion on has drastically changed after a second attempt at playing?
Okay, thanks Brad for the question. Tricky question, because honestly, and I think a lot of games journalists and people who've been working, especially on print magazines, or they've been in a situation where they're reviewing a ton of games, they don't really have time to go back and play games second, third times. It's rare that I've been able to do that. And so, are there any games that I've gone back to the second time and played through again and had drastically different opinions on? No, but I do get this thing quite often where I can be in love with a game and massively enjoying it, and then go back to it and completely change my mind and fall out of love with it straight away. Now, this happened to me just last week on Final Fantasy 15, and it's no indictment of the game because I'm so early on that I couldn't possibly pass judgment on it. But I put it on, and I really enjoyed the first 2 hours. I was kind of surprised at myself. I could stomach some of the slightly more twee nature and the haircuts and things like that. I have actually enjoyed previous Final Fantasy games. I put it on just the other day though, to keep going, and the amount of stuff in the game, the amount of lessons it's trying to teach you, and the amount of information was so overwhelming that I was just like, I just can't. I needed to go to something simpler. I was kind of tired at the time. That happens a lot for me for some reason. It's very rare that it happens the other way around. It's very rare that I'll go into a game hating it and then come back and love it. So, to answer your question, I can't even remember the last time that I played a game twice, from start to finish. Honestly, yeah, literally can't remember. So, can't answer that question in that respect. But yes, quite often fall out of love with games on, day after, 2 days after, coming back to it a week later. That's super common with me.
Kurt Lewin says, why are sports games never considered for or have won the GOTY award?
Thanks, Kurt, for the question, and always thanks for your support on everything, mate. And I know you've written a blog about this subject as well, why sports games don't win Game of the Year. And I think the answer is just because the yearly iteration factor, and the fact that, say, in an outlet where they have 3, 4, 5 people, maybe even more voting, it's unlikely that enough people are going to vote it number one, whether it's a Pro Evo. Probably in this country, it's probably only going to be Pro Evo that really gets to that level, because FIFA players, I don't know, or FIFA fans, I don't know if they'd ever put it all the way to the top of their lists. Especially in the last few editions of FIFA. So I think it's just a case of numbers, and then it's a case of its yearly iterations. So whereas, a Pro Evolution Soccer 2017 came close to the top of my personal Game of the Year list, it was probably in the top 3 or 4 if I'm remembering correctly. It still didn't quite hit number 1, but it's a fair point. Some of these games, the NBA 2K games, and I'd say Pro Evo, and even some of the UFC games, they are truly excellent and sort of don't warrant being dismissed just because they're sports games. And I think if you're in a situation, certainly if I was in a situation where I was, say, living in a student house like I was many, many years ago, and we had Pro Evo 2017 and like 3 other lads living in the house, and we played it every single day, 4-player, easily it would be Game of the Year. There'd be no question, because of it's about context and how you consume and timing and all that sort of stuff. But I think realistically, I think we both know that's the reason why it doesn't hit the top of these Game of the Year lists. But at the same time, I do think that the great sports games do deserve more praise and shouldn't just be dismissed as yearly franchises, because quite often they are some of the best multiplayer games out there, and also they do mean a hell of a lot to a hell of a lot of people, and I think that's not insignificant. That should be recognised.
Luke Dawson says, Nintendo Switch monthly sub cost. Do you know if the pricing in this image correct? And do you think it represents value?
So yeah, that's a really interesting image, and I've shared it on the video, so thank you very much for that. And clearly, I mean, it makes sense, right? It does definitely make sense in some ways, and I think it would be amazing for the consumer to pay $5, £6, £4, whatever it is a month, and get that access to that back catalogue. But two points from me. One, if I think that would be, if it's say $5 a month, $60 a year, £40 a year, whatever, well, the way the currency is now, more like 50, 52. I don't think I've ever spent that much in total on back catalogue games on Virtual Console. Now that's just me. I just have stronger memories of those games, and like I answered in the previous question, it's rare that I go back and play games multiple times. But I understand that some people really enjoy going back through and collecting all those games and replaying and sort of remembering those moments. So totally understand that. And in truth, if I had access to that back catalogue and it was that price, I would probably pay it, and I would probably experience some of those games again, especially with Elliot, my eldest, who's 5.5, absolute Nintendo fan, and really enjoys the simplicity of 2D games as well. He's not quite got his head around twin sticks yet, but when it comes to 2D games or like a 3D Mario or something like that, he's on the ball, honestly, seriously good. So in that respect, it clearly would be something that would be great for the consumer to have a kind of Netflix-style catalogue for Virtual Console. But the thing is with that piece of evidence, well, it's not evidence, is it? I've used the wrong word. There's no scientific fact there. There's no evidence whatsoever. There's no monetary evidence. So there's a lot of information that will be better for Nintendo, but there's no guarantee it'll be better than Nintendo. Maybe one of Nintendo's main revenue streams at the moment is a Virtual Console in terms of margins. Maybe that's why they keep selling you these games, because the margins are just so good, and maybe they've considered constantly having that switch around, and they said the bandwidth would be low, but it's a constant thing. So maybe we don't know. This is the point. We don't know the answer to that question. So it's a great image. I agree with it. I think it'd be great for the consumer. I would like that. Of course I would. But without evidence, or without at least even quotes from people internally at Nintendo, which we're not going to get, we can't put that forward as some sort of case study, because it's basically just a bunch of opinions. But saying that, I'd want it. I'm sure everyone else would too.
David Turner says, what's the hardest review you've ever had to write, and what's been the most fun?
So a couple of questions there. What has been the hardest review that I've ever had to do? Honestly, probably really early on when I first started on gamestm. Within about a week, I was given one of the East games, and it was like the YS games to review. I think that's what they're called. I had never heard of this series before. I had no idea what they were. I had no experience with it, and I think it was given to me as a test. And yeah, I just sat there for a couple of days trying to play and understand this game. Now, this certainly wasn't before the internet, but it was before you could just get a wealth of information from the internet. Now, if I had to do this, I'd probably go back and watch a walkthrough of the previous game in the series to get an idea of just wrap my head around how you're supposed to play this game. That wasn't really possible. So I ended up, honestly, and I'll own this, I did a terrible job with that review. So I apologise. I mean, this is a decade ago, so it doesn't really matter. So I apologise to the people that put that game out. It shouldn't have been given to me really, but I understand why it was from a sort of magazine point of view. So when magazines had a bit more power and it was important to test people coming on and not just throw them the easy stuff that they know. It was important to push them and test them. And it's like another thing that I was given to do was given a 4-line press release with a single screenshot and asked to write a 2-page preview of it. Yep, that's how magazines used to work back in the day. So yeah, a little secret there. And that was a test. It's a test. Can you write on no information and make an entertaining piece? And I mean, I used to do similar things to new writers who come on to the magazines. Maybe nothing that strict. I don't think that actually produces great content. But yeah, long story short, a game called East something back on PS2 many years ago, I'd say was probably my hardest review because you also had the nerves. He's like new in the job, you want to impress people, you're nervous about fucking everything up. It's the same with any job. So I'd say that. Most fun review, completely all the way in the other direction. That was like, I think the second or third review I ever did professionally. This would be the most recent, which is Titanfall 2, and I know you'll like that answer, Dave. Just a tremendous day overall. The opportunity, I hadn't been on a review event trip or sort of a games press event trip for ages. The opportunity to go and sit in a hotel room and play Titanfall 2's campaign in one sitting in a comfortable scenario was so much fun. And then in the evening to have the opportunity to sit with people from Respawn, the very people that had made the game that you just played, have some dinner and talk through the game and their history with them is, it was unparalleled. It was really one of the best days I had last year. So yeah, nice, hardest all the way back then, easiest or most fun, actually not easiest, most fun would be Titanfall 2. So there we go, 5 questions in the bag. Now what's going to happen in this show is it will be weekly, and I may do it more often depending on how many questions we get through. But what's going to be the most fun thing about this show is I'm going to any time that I'm with another games journalist that I know very well, or a developer, or someone from the industry, I do a lot of stuff around esports as well, people from that world, I'm going to basically tweet it out beforehand. I'm going to be with this person, if they agree, obviously, and then just stick the camera on and answer 5-6 questions and just get their input and get them to answer it as well. Yes, it's a complete rip-off of Ask Gary V. I've already admitted it, so I don't feel ashamed about it. But I think that's going to be fun. I think we've seen a million interviews with a million developers, and there's only so many questions you can ask developers, and you can still get great insight from developers about their games or in certain interview situations. But the way most interviews are structured these days are you're basically pushed into a room, you're given 10 minutes, and you basically got to keep it on topic. And you can still get good answers, and it's like I've had fortunate times with people from Ubisoft Montreal, all those guys always seem to give great answers. But I think this is a slightly different format. I think it could be fun. We're going to get it with journos. We're going to get it with all sorts of people who are just even gamers who are maybe have a following from somewhere else. Whatever life gives to me, I'm going to try and do the show with people like that. And I think that'll be good fun, and it makes it quite different to the other show I'm doing on the channel, State of Play, and anything else I'm doing. So yeah, please do get your questions. You can leave them in the comments here, or just tweet them to me at Jon Denton. When I've figured out a name for this show, and yeah, remember, if you want to try and name the show, tweet at me, stick it in the comments. I can't think of anything apart from Ask JD, which is crap. Tweet them to me, and I'll set up an email once I've got a name for the show, and then we can do email questions so it's a bit longer. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, I get the feeling you probably have if you're watching this show particularly, but if you haven't already and you like the idea of a channel that covers games from a games journalist point of view and tries to go in depth and is going to be talking to developers and a few bits of insight, please do hit the subscribe button. I say this every single time, but growth on the channel in terms of subscribers is going to allow more access, which makes for better content, and that circle keeps going and it grows, and then the channel gets better, people guests for the show will get better, State of Play will get better, everything will get better. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jon Denton, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace!